Wow, it's quite a crowd. Welcome. I think we're actually going to fill the room. And this is our biggest event yet. Thank you all for coming. It's a long way, and I know it's an expensive week to take you away from work. But we try and make it worth it, and I promise you by the end of the week, you're going to be very tired. So I would like to just spend a few minutes talking a little bit about Linaro and its membership. Make a couple of small announcements, and then talk a little bit about the vision we have at Linaro for where this is going. This is actually not a very easy thing to predict, because where we go is led by our members. But hopefully I've got some food for thought, and hopefully it'll send you away to think about the various things you'd like Linaro to do. First, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that have happened since last Connect. The last Connect was in Copenhagen in the fourth quarter of last year in October. Shortly after Copenhagen, we formed the Linaro Enterprise Group. This is a new group for Linaro where, rather than our existing club and core members who are working across open source and ARM, we identified the need for some companies to come together and work in a specific market segment. And in this case, a group of companies wanted to work with Linaro and come together and work on core open source software for ARM servers. So there's a number of technical activities that are going on. I'm very proud to announce that within 3 months, that group's gone from nothing, from being formed, to now being 25 engineers working hard under the direction of Andrea Gallo. Andrea, where's Andrea? Stand up, please. He's making a huge impact already. So all of you in the enterprise group know that Andrea is working very, very hard and helping you work together on what's important for the forthcoming ARM server market. Our goals here are to reduce costs so that we don't all engineer the same software again and again, eliminate fragmentation, and accelerate time to market. And this enables members to innovate and focus on their own differentiation and value add. So there were 14 founding companies of the enterprise group. A couple of weeks ago in Santa Clara, we announced a second group focused on core open source software for networking equipment. And again, a similar model, sharing engineering between a group of companies who need to establish some core software for their market. And our goal here is to deliver open source software for the next generation of low power networking equipment. Initially focusing on areas of specific interest to the networking market, such as real-time support virtualization for networking equipment, including real-time support, more work on power management, and interfacing to the specialized hardware in networking equipment, routers and switches. Also dealing with some of the mixed endian legacy code that needs to be dealt with in this market. So there were actually 12 companies, two of whom are being rather coy and haven't announced their names yet. But I'm very pleased to announce this group as well. And the interesting thing about these groups is that they include not only SoC vendors, but also other members of the ecosystem. So distributions, equipment manufacturers, and end users. So I want to talk a little bit about what's changed since Copenhagen, because a lot's happened. I think everybody knows, and in Copenhagen, the original founding core members of Linaro, ARM and TI, were joined by HiSilicon. And we had a club membership consisting of LG Electronics, who joined last year, joining Samsung and ST Ericsson as our club members. And our core and club members contribute a large number of engineers, between 5 and 10 engineers, into Linaro, as well as significant funds to enable us to build the organization and hire more engineers. We also had a couple of community members at that time, IBM and Freescale, who've been previously working with Linaro and continue to put resources in, even despite the fact they were no longer able to be full club members. I'm very pleased to announce that this Connect, we welcome 2 new members. Firstly, Fujitsu, There's a group, big group here from Fujitsu, if they'd like to stand up so that you all know where they are. The Fujitsu group, thank you very much. Welcome. Please. It can be a little intimidating to come to Connect for the first time. Please do try and meet new companies, new people, and welcome them and explain, help them to understand what's great about Linaro and Linaro Connect. And the second new member, who I'd like to announce, new club member, is Broadcom. Where are the Broadcom chaps? Anybody from Broadcom, please stand up. Thanks very much for coming. And I think this really is a testament to the success that Linaro is achieving and the return on the investment from club and core members that we're delivering. But of course, what's also happened is Linaro's membership has grown hugely from the group members who've also joined in the last 6 months. So going from Copenhagen to here, in the space of about 5 months, we've grown from 8 members to over 24. So we're very, very pleased, and we're looking forward to helping all of you work together on open source. So thank you very much. I do have a couple of announcements to make. The first is that for those of you who've been with Linaro a long time, you'll remember that we originally had a VP of engineering who was on loan to us from Canonical in the early days. And last year, he went back into Canonical and is doing some interesting things. Actually, Kiko, are you here? Where's Kiko? Is he here? I think he's coming this week to attend some of the server activities where he's representing Canonical. But as a result, we've since then had a number of very strong people helping us manage our engineering organization, one of whom we hired in August to run our working groups. And I'm pleased to say today that we are appointing Mark Orvek, who's been with us since August, previously Vice President of Engineering at Monte Vista, as the Linaro Vice President of Engineering. And as the company's grown, that's becoming a big job. So thank you very much for taking that on, Mark. And the second announcement that I've got to make is Cole in the room. Cole at the back from Open Compute, welcome. So the Open Compute organization, I'm sure all of you have heard about it, making a lot of noise, developing open source hardware solutions to the problem of building low power, energy efficient data centers. They're getting a huge amount of interest across the industry, and they're holding a mini summit meeting here tomorrow and Wednesday, and you're very welcome to see what they're up to and going on. And Cole heads up the Open Compute organization, so please talk to him if you'd like more information on that. So welcome to the Open Compute. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the ARM community. So the thing about ARM is that together it is an amazing engine for innovation and growth. Individually, there are small companies, there are startups, there are very well-established companies. Together, there's nothing like it in terms of microprocessor architecture. 8.7 billion ARM chips were shipped in 2012. And of course, we all think of ARM as low power. It's in ARM's DNA, originally from mobile, but more and more, this is becoming important in every single computing sector. Data centers alone are using 2.2% of the US energy consumption. It's a huge number. And if you think about routers and switches with everything that's going on in the world of data, there's no real attention being paid to power management in networking equipment, but it's burning a lot of energy. And even set-top boxes that sit in your home. I mean, why does a set-top box need to use 70 to 100 watts continuously when you're asleep and it just sits there chewing up power, taping? I mean, disk drives don't use 100 watts. How come it's using 100 watts? So there's enormous opportunity through using ARM's architecture to reduce our energy consumption. But it's not only low power. What's really interesting about ARM, to me, and to those of us who've made the strategic decision to work with ARM, is that it's the opportunity for differentiation and innovation. And because of ARM's licensing model, there's this amazing opportunity for startups and established companies to go and derive huge value from differentiation and innovation. And the rate of innovation around the ARM architecture is accelerating hugely. So I wanted to look back a little bit and try and look at some of the, not so long ago, the way we were. And I was searching for a graphic for this, and the best I could find was this one, which basically tries to express the fact that the ARM SoC community was basically a very large group of penguins, which is called a waddle, by the way. And the reason for that is that every vendor had their own Linux. In fact, it was worse than that. Every vendor had multiple implementations of Linux in the ARM space. Everybody developed their own clock drivers. Everybody developed their own serial drivers. Everybody created their own drivers for their GPIO pins, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't just simple stuff. Everybody actually started engineering kernel memory management because the stuff in the Linux kernel didn't meet the requirements of the ARM community. So rather than working together, everybody did it themselves. And why not? Everybody licensed the hardware from ARM, and ARM didn't have the resources to do it completely themselves, although ARM had their own implementation as well. Go figure. So everybody was expending a huge amount of resource on non-value-adding differentiation. Everybody has to have a serial driver. Everybody has to have pin mucks, and so on. And the equation for the engineers amongst us is that fragmentation of core software is a really bad idea. It leads to multiple patch sets, little upstreaming because there's so many different solutions to the same problem, and therefore high maintenance costs, wasted resources, and actually delays to products because the quality isn't great either. So this is not the way to move forward. And 2.5 years ago, Linaro was formed as an open source software engineering organization and as a place for the ARM vendors to collaborate on building core software. And the goal was to do this in the open as open source software and deliver through upstreaming. And working together, we've been able to make huge strides on helping the ARM community come together in terms of building core open source software and enabling the companies involved to focus their resource not on doing all of this core software, but rather on differentiating and innovating in their own areas. Linaro is a work in progress. We've only been going 2.5 years, and it's a testament to what we've achieved that everybody is here. There have been dramatic improvements to the way the community has approached the ARM Linux kernel and contributions. With the help of you and the help of some of the things that Linaro and ARM have done, we now have the ARM SoC tree, we have device tree for ARM, we have unified memory management scheme. We're going a long way to enabling SoC vendors to build a single Z image across multiple different vendors. And Linaro and all of you and Linaro's members are now a major contributor to the Linux kernel and to other open source projects. So congratulations. It's an amazing achievement. So, we were formed in 2010 as an open source software engineering organization. And now, in terms of ARM and the community, what we're trying to do is move from the waddle of penguins to really focusing on building on top of the single Linux kernel. And as I say, I think we've made substantial strides. I want to talk a little bit about hardware, hardware vision. I guess hardware vision is now Google Glass. It's hardware and vision. But it's actually kind of scary when you think about the kind of things that are on the way. Pretty much everything that we're thinking about in the mobile space, in the Internet of Things, in embedded devices, all the way up to the other end of the cloud where there's networking equipment, routers, switches, everything is moving to requiring really pretty powerful microprocessors. And ARM is establishing itself as the architecture of choice in a huge number of these spaces. And if you think about it, if you think about the rate of change of this industry, it's ARM because of the way that they license their technology and enable so many different companies to do so many different things, that innovation and differentiation in the business model is needed to keep up with the pace of change. And it's not just the hardware, the devices, the toys, it's also the data. Data rates are changing. And it's quite incredible to think about, even 10 years ago, the data centers that you see today just didn't exist. And the rate of building of these data centers, the kind of problems that Open Compute is trying to resolve, are arising because wireless data is becoming cheaper by the day, the bandwidths are becoming higher. Think of the number of photos that have to be accessed instantly that you took 10, 15 years ago. And the rate of growth of this data is just exponentially increasing. The number of videos stored on Netflix, all these videos, the video we're taking today on Google Hangouts, it's going to be here forever. It's a lot of data. And the scary number is this one. This is the number of bytes of data that we're creating a day, and it's growing very rapidly. I wish I had one of those numbers like the US debt. It just continues to go up. This is the same. And we're in the middle. We don't really know it because we're in the middle of it, and it's hard to see when you're in the middle of a disruption. But I'm pretty sure that in 10 years' time, we're going to look back and we're going to say this was an incredibly disruptive period in the industry. Because if you think about all these devices, these embedded markets, the networking challenges, the server challenges, the things that are going to happen in the Internet of Things, one size doesn't work anymore. The historic rate of change is not fast enough to cope with what's happening. And one vendor alone cannot possibly compete. They can't do everything. And so ARM's business model and the partnership that ARM have built of all of their licensees across all of their different segments are absolutely key to getting us through this disruptive period. And it's a huge opportunity. And in my view, SoCs, the actual physical SoC that's being created in all sorts of different markets and the open source software movement are the agents of this disruptive change. Without them, it couldn't be done. And they are key components of actually building the future. And this is really exciting for Linaro because it presents a substantial opportunity for Linaro to help all of these companies achieve their goals and do that in a way that is more cost-effective than everybody going off and trying to do it themselves. There's a substantial opportunity for delivering value, and more companies are seeing that benefit and coming to join us. And our goal is to collaborate on core software and standards and free all of our members up, free more of their resources up to go and innovate. So we're seeing the expectation of a pretty significant increase in membership and resources moving forward. Through this, we'll continue our focus on our core activities. And so that's working on improving the Linux kernel, enabling the kernel for this new technology, working on power management, which is still pretty crude in a lot of areas, working on graphics, multimedia, and specialized I/O interfaces for things like networking, and improving tools. And through all of this, working on testing and validation to make sure that the software we deliver to the open source community has been thoroughly tested. We also see more groups and segments being interested in doing the similar kind of thing that we've done with the server group and with the networking group, where groups, although they want to use all of the goodness, all of the engineering that comes out of Linaro, they want to focus a software engineering team on a particular problem space. And so the kind of things that you can think of where ARM is starting to, again, generate substantial innovation, and there's a lot of change going on in the industry, are around things like set-top box digital TV market, embedded devices, and automotive, which has longer timetables. But we can imagine more groups being formed around these special segments. The other interesting thing about Linaro over the last couple of years is we're noticing that there's a shift from consolidation into working on new technology. So we're not, now that device tree and a single pin mux driver and clock control have been kind of dealt with, we're now starting to move to innovation and new technology and helping ARM bring their new technology into the world from the software point of view. So things like ARM's Big Little architecture and ARM v8, there's a lot of software coming out from ARM and being worked on in Linaro in the open source world. So we're pretty excited by all of that. So technology vision is always very difficult because by definition with what Linaro is doing, we're doing that for our members, and so I kind of need all your vision to be able to construct our vision. And that's what we work with your representatives on the steering committees in Linaro on. But there are some trends that are fairly clear. Firstly, on ARM v7, there's a lot of work that's still going on ARM v7, and that's because ARM continues to innovate. There continue to be huge number of applications where 32-bit technology is the appropriate technology, particularly as we start moving into the Internet of Things and small devices. So lower power, more cores, more flexibility, more functionality on the SoC, the big little kind of concept to reduce power when we're not using the device so much, even though it's always on. Microcontrollers are going to start to become a big issue, and I'll talk a bit about that in a moment. And of course, ARM v8, the new 64-bit technology, is just going to change everything, again, from mobile all the way to server, and is going to impact every single industry that we work in. Through all of this, power management is going to become a recurring theme, I'm completely convinced. But I also think there's going to be more effort needed in the open source community on software and tools for the whole SoC. As more and more processors and cores and specialized engines move onto the SoC, some of them including proprietary technology, it's going to be more and more important to create standard interfaces and tools so that we can measure the power consumption of the whole device and we can work and tune the whole device. And this covers everything from boot architectures, the main processor cores, GPU use, specialized I/O processors and DSPs and things sitting on the piece of silicon. And there's going to be a lot of work required on the security side. Again, I'll come to that in a moment. So, vision, the open source for the Internet of Things. This is an area that I think is going to become very important over the next few years in open source. And it's not because if I'm creating a small device, a health monitoring device or a piece of wearable technology, there's a lot of software out there that I can usually get free from an SoC vendor or a little real-time executive or a little piece of code that I can write. And that's fine. I can write the software. I can get the software from a variety of sources. I don't have to pay anything for it. But what's the result of this? We're going to end up with thousands, tens of thousands of different devices running different pieces of software, all talking to the cloud and transmitting data. So clearly we need common APIs. We're also going to have a horrendous security problem because I actually don't want my heart rate to be transmitted to the world so that you can tell me if I'm about to fall over. That's kind of private to me. And I also don't, there's various things that people do put on the net that I certainly don't want put on the net. Security is going to become everything in terms of the Internet of Things. And so I think there's a huge opportunity, whether it's for micro Linux or whether it's for an open source kind of alternative, to be the core OS for the Internet of Things at the device level. When you think about things like Google Glass, Nest, thermostats, home energy control, health and fitness monitors, cameras, data, all these things are putting data up into the cloud. And if there was a common way of making all of these million devices kind of speak the same language, again, it would make everybody's life a lot easier, and it would also solve a lot of problems in terms of security. And the only way of doing that, in my opinion, is through the open source community. I don't think you can do it by creating, even if it's free and you give it away, it doesn't help because you're creating all of these different languages. So I think there's a big opportunity for Linaro and the ARM community to come together and work on this problem, looking a few years out. I also think security is something that clearly there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of commercial interest in. I think it's becoming increasingly important that open source leverages the security hardware that's built into ARM to create reference and testing platforms from which the commercial companies can then go and create their offerings. And at the moment, it's kind of a little bit of a black box. I think there's some opportunities there. And finally, we intend to continue to use Lava and really try and establish it as best practices for open source testing for everybody to use. We've created this for our own purposes. It makes a lot of sense to encourage more of the community to use the same infrastructure. So finally, I'd just like to remind everybody that our vision is your vision. You need to tell us what you want us to do. And our core and club members drive the overall open source agenda and core roadmap for Linaro. And the core and club members are comprised of ARM themselves and a number of the key SoC vendors spanning multiple industry segments. The group members are increasingly going to become a driving force within Linaro. In fact, already LEG is the biggest single group in Linaro. And that's going to extend Linaro membership not only in SoC vendors, but also into the ecosystem. And that's a really good thing, because if distributions, equipment manufacturers, software partners, and end users are helping shape the requirements and participating in the creation of these standards and then the building of the software to implement these standards, everybody wins, and it frees up everybody's resources to go and focus on their own proprietary innovation. And that really does drive costs down and enables you to react faster to disruption. So group members will drive sector roadmaps and extend us further into the ecosystem. And we want to continue to build on this unique thing that we think we have in Linaro, which is where we're helping all of our members to succeed, and that's our goal. So finally, I just want to comment, you're here for a week. It's going to be a very intense week. Some of my colleagues will talk a little bit more about this in a moment. But make it matter. This is a unique opportunity to get engineers together from all sorts of different historically competing companies and work together on common problems. Linaro is built on sharing engineering to solve common problems and reduce everybody's costs. So use this opportunity to collaborate and work together. And if there's one thing I ask is, get out of your comfort zone, talk to people in other companies. Because from talking to other companies about the common problems we have, that is why you created Linaro, and that's why we're here to help you. So with that, I'm going to hand over to David, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Have fun this week. Work hard. It's going to be an action-packed week. Thank you, everybody.